Please be advised, this episode does have content that some may find distressing. As always, listener discretion is advised and it is not suitable for anyone under the age of 13.
Hello and welcome to It's Murder Up North, and the third episode delving into a series of high-profile murders which occurred between December 1985 and the spring of 1986. At 8:30 on Saturday the 19th of April 1986, the body of 15-year-old Martia Tamboza was discovered in a wooded area close to the village of West Horsley, making it the darkest day in the lives of her family. As the shadow of death loomed over them, 50 miles away, 29-year-old Anne Locke was preparing for the happiest day of her life, blissfully unaware that soon her name would become woven with that of Martia's. Join me as I delve into Anne's life, disappearance and death. Anne Veronica Sunyuk was born on the 11th of June 1956 in the North London borough of Barnet. A bright young lady with blonde locks and a bubbly personality, she left school at 18 and quickly found work as a secretary. Beginning her working life at the BBC, she would then go on to work for the rival television studio ATV, which is part of ITV. Outside of work, Anne, who was still living with her parents and grandmother, developed a love of diving, and it was through this passion that, in 1982, she met her future husband Lawrence Locke, who worked at his family-owned butchers and wholesale meat trading company. But in 1984, Anne's world would be shaken by the deaths of both her parents. This loss meant that, upon her wedding day, her father was not there to walk Anne down the aisle, with her best friend's father doing the honours in his absence. The 29-year-old's best friend Leslie served as maid of honour for Anne and Lawrence's nuptials on the 19th of April 1986, after which the newlyweds set off to the Seychelles for a 3-week-long honeymoon, a trip organised by Lawrence as a surprise for his new wife. It wasn't the only surprise the couple were anticipating, as the newlyweds, who resided alongside Anne's grandmother, Edna Goff, were eager to fill their large detached home with the sound of children. As Lawrence would later state, they'd been hoping for a honeymoon baby. Having returned from their honeymoon on the 8th of May, the couple slowly got back into the routine of day-to-day life, with the new Mrs. Locke heading back to work on the 12th of May with a spring in her step and a sun-kissed glow. During the week, Anne would catch the train into London, where for the last 3 years she had been working for London Weekend Television, LWT for short, which was based at Kent House on the South Bank. The studios produced various shows including the series Police 5, which in January 1986 had aired a reconstruction and appeal pertaining to the murder of Alison Day. It was a case Anne may well have been aware of, as she typed up the scripts for many of the shows prior to them being sent out to the producers' homes. As was the situation faced by Alison Day, Anne would find herself having to take a number of trains to complete her journey into London. Yet unlike Alison, Anne had traversed the route on many occasions, only choosing to drive if she had to work on a Sunday when the roads were quieter. Yet a number of circumstances would result in the newlywed having to catch the train on Sunday the 18th of April 1986. First, Anne sold her car on the 15th of April, as she intended to purchase a new one for her 30th birthday, which was just 3 weeks away. The second reason was due to a change in her plans for the weekend. Initially, she and Lawrence intended to go on a diving trip to Dorset, but this was scuppered when she was assigned the role of duty secretary. This meant she would have to go to work should she be needed. Therefore, Mr. and Mrs. Locke parted ways for the weekend. Lawrence headed to Dorset with friends, while Anne remained at home with her grandmother. It had been a quiet weekend for the pair, That was until the phone rang at around midday on Sunday. Anne was requested to head to LWT to finish some scripts, which needed to be delivered to producers that night. Bidding her 86-year-old grandmother goodbye, Anne, with her blonde hair tied in a neat ponytail, set off on her red bike towards Brookman's Park railway station. Upon her arrival, she deposited her bike in the wooden shed, before heading to the ticket office where the 29-year-old was a familiar face to the clerk on duty. Situated 19 miles north of central London, the station tended to be busy only when commuters passed through in the morning and again in the afternoons. Outside of rush hour and at the weekends, the station quickly returned to a more peaceful state. Being surrounded by fields and woodlands, it wasn't deemed necessary for the rural setting to have a large complement of staff, with a single clerk on duty until 8 p.m. However, as Anne boarded the train at 3:45, she lightly anticipated being home by that time. This would prove to be the final circumstance which put her in the path of a killer. Finding herself working later than anticipated, Anne did not leave the LWT studios until 8:30. Unaware that her granddaughter had been delayed at work, Edna began to worry, and so by the time Lawrence returned home from his diving trip just before 10 p.m, he was greeted by a very anxious 86-year-old on the driveway. Mr. Locke later stated, "I returned to find Anne's grandmother very distressed. Anne had never been late before without phoning her." But before giving in to worry, Lawrence placed a call to the London Weekend TV studios and was informed that Anne had left the building at 8:30. His stomach turned a little more, but given the various train transfers his wife would have to take home, he pondered whether she had simply been delayed along her route. Knowing that a London train was due to arrive at 10 Mr. Locke took the couple of minutes to unhitch the bolt from his vehicle before driving the 5 minutes to Brookman's Park station. The ticket office was locked up for the night, and beneath the dull glow of the lights, no figures moved on the platform. The train came and went, but Anne failed to appear. More perturbing was the absence of her bike from the unlocked wooden shed. Momentarily, the missing bike would give Lawrence a glimmer of hope. Believing that Anne may have opted to ride to Potter's Bar, despite it being a 20-minute ride from their home, it was still a manned station at night. But upon driving there and speaking to the staff on duty, his hopes were dashed, as they advised that no one matching Anne's description had been seen there that day. Running out of options, Lawrence made late-night phone calls to his wife's friends, none of whom had seen or heard from the 29-year-old. Unable to explain her absence any longer, and faced with the virtually impossible prospect of finding Anne within the 19 miles from London to Brookman's Park, Lawrence turned to the police for help, ill-prepared for the turmoil that he was about to face. On the surface, Lawrence presented himself as an extremely concerned husband, who was frantic to find his new bride. But the question for the police, and in turn the press, was whether this was simply a facade. Had Anne chosen to disappear due to issues in the couple's relationship, or was Lawrence trying to cover up a dark deed? As with the fiancé of Alison Day, Lawrence would come under scrutiny. Had his trip to Dorset been used as a ploy? This was a suggestion which garnered further interest when the timings provided by Lawrence pertaining to when he arrived at the train station to look for Anne was found to be inaccurate. While police delved into these discrepancies, officers conducted interviews with work colleagues, neighbours and friends, from whom they garnered information regarding Anne and her relationship with Lawrence. Through these, it was quickly established that the 29-year-old was in a very happy place in her life. She had married the man she loved and was looking forward to being a mother in the foreseeable future. Aside from this, she was a reliable and fiercely loyal granddaughter. This latter detail, many would state, was a reason Anne would not have left of her own volition, especially because she was Edna's last living relative. It was also quickly established that the discrepancy in the timings given by Lawrence were likely due to maintenance work on the rail network, which had caused some services to be delayed. But while that cleared up one question, another conundrum presented itself when Anne's bike was discovered the following morning, leaning neatly against a fence roughly 60 yards away from Buckman's Park station, with the padlock chain used to secure it still affixed through the rear wheel. But why was it there? According to the ticket clerk at the station, the bike had been the only one left in the wooden shed when he went home at 8 p.m. As such, he had left the doors unlocked to allow the owner to retrieve it. However, when Lawrence checked just after 10 p.m, the shed was empty. Had Anne retrieved her bike? If so, why hadn't she removed the padlock? Had Lawrence or some unknown individual moved it in order to throw police off the scent? Or was its removal completely unconnected to Anne's disappearance? Perhaps the thieves had seen an opportunity to steal it, but were disturbed from their task and forced to abandon the bike. For the police, only one of these scenarios implied that Anne had actually made it to Brookman's Park that Sunday night, and the prospect that she had disappeared at another point during the journey loomed like a dark cloud over the investigation. It would be a formidable task to retrace the length of her 19-mile journey, especially considering it was undertaken on a day when most shops and businesses were typically closed, meaning Sunday evenings on the train network tended to be much quieter, which in turn meant fewer potential witnesses. Undeterred, efforts were made to track down anyone who may have seen Anne, who was wearing blue jeans and white high-tech trainers. These were paired with a white, sleeveless ski jacket, which was blue on the back, underneath which she wore a light pink sweater embellished with small Highland terriers, and she carried a black leather bag. Officers retraced her route, starting off with her 10-minute walk from the LWT studios on the South Bank to the York Road entrance of Waterloo Underground Station. From here, she would usually take the Bakerloo line to Oxford Circus, then change to the Victoria line to Finsbury Park, from where she would commence the final leg of her journey via the British Rail service to Brookman's Park. It was estimated that given the time she left work and the various transfers, Anne likely caught the 9:38 train from Finsbury, which would have arrived at her home station by 1 minute past 10. Yet investigators were eager to establish whether she had made it to that point. Within days of Anne's disappearance, the press had picked up on the story, with headlines reporting on the missing bride, whose distraught husband was pleading for his wife to be returned to him safely. Amidst his anguished pleas, 26-year-old Lawrence also addressed the gathering speculation regarding his potential involvement, stating, "I know people will point the finger of suspicion at me, but gossips can say what they like. I know the truth, and that is, I love Anne and I just want her back." With him adding tearfully, "There is no happiness here anymore without my Anne. I have to believe she is still alive and will come home to me soon." Referring to his wife's grandmother, Mr. Locke said, "It's so cruel. Anne is her last living relative. Their lives revolve around each other. I beg anyone who is holding Anne, please, please, please let her come home." He would also reveal his regret at leaving Anne that weekend to go on a diving trip, and his feeling of helplessness when he was unable to locate her, recalling that in his desperation he had gotten down on his hands and knees to search the undergrowth near the station in hopes of finding any traces of his beloved wife. Once the police took over, his feelings of being useless intensified, with him telling the press, "I feel I just want to go out and search, just do something, but I don't know what to do. I just sit here praying she will ring, and it will all have been just a horrible dream." It wasn't only her husband who was afraid of what had happened to Anne. As the days passed, it became harder for the police to explain her absence. They were already considering the worst-case scenario. As a spokesman stated, "We are treating this very seriously. She had just come back from honeymoon in the Seychelles, and everything points to a happy home life. We are becoming increasingly concerned for her safety. Detective Chief Superintendent Ron Archer, who headed the investigation, would add, "The longer we wait with no sign of her, the more we fear she has come to harm, if she has been abducted, or worse." The officer proceeded to appeal to anyone who may have seen Anne during her journey from London to Brooksman's Park to get in touch, while also asking for further information regarding Anne's bike, saying, "The removal of that cycle is suspicious, but there have been a number of thefts from the cycle shed." With this possibility in mind, the thief was assured that if they came forward and admitted to moving the bike, they would be treated leniently. It would also be stated that while such thefts did occur, more serious offences were very rare in and around the affluent Brookman's Park area. The police were also careful to point out that Mr. Locke's alibi for that Sunday evening had been verified, with it being noted that his Land Rover, which was towing a boat, had been seen amidst a convoy of vehicles driven by his friends, who had accompanied him on his diving trip to Dorset. On the 22nd of May 1986, just a day prior to what would have been Alison Day's 20th birthday, BBC Crime Watch aired an appeal regarding the murder of 15-year-old Martia Tamboza. Immediately following this reconstruction was the segment of the show known as the Help Desk, during which a number of brief appeals are made. The first report pertained to the disappearance of Anne Locke, which for the show was an unusual choice, as normally they were brought in to help police once a case was several weeks old, whereas Anne had been missing for just 4 days. With hindsight, it is disconcerting seeing these cases shown back to back, knowing that at the time the police had not yet started to consider a connection. The brief segment that focused on Anne did help generate new leads, with several people coming forward to state they had seen the blonde-haired secretary as she made her way home. Meanwhile, the first inklings of a possible link to the murder of Martia were being suggested. As the Daily Express published on the 24th of May, the similarities between the two cases, despite them occurring 50 miles apart on opposite sides of the capital. The newspaper's primary supposition was that both incidents had occurred close to railway lines, near train stations ideally situated for access to London, and in each case a bike had been abandoned. But these were only tentative links, not only because of the distance between the two sides, but also Anne was still missing, and there was no definitive means to conclusively draw a connection. As such, Surrey police continued their investigation into Martia's case, and Hertfordshire focused on Anne's disappearance. However, the shadow of suspicion continued to loom over Lawrence Locke, particularly amongst some of the tabloids, who would make a point of highlighting that he worked as a butcher. And on the 26th of May, stories focused on a new development in his home. The Mirror led with the headline, "Just Good Friends, Blonde Leslie and Me by Missing Bride's Husband." The article went on to report that Mr. Locke was, quote, "now sharing his home with her attractive blonde bridesmaid," while the Daily Star also published reports about the new addition to the Locke household. With spurious speculation that he was having an affair with Anne's best friend Leslie, Lawrence spoke to the press to deny the accusations, insisting, "There is nothing between Leslie and me. To say anything else is despicable. She's getting married in September. Leslie is a best friend to Anne and to her grandmother, who lives with us. She has stayed here since Anne went missing and has been a great support to Anne's 86-year-old Nan, who has no relatives, nobody else to turn to." It was a statement reiterated by Leslie, who said she had a sisterly bond with the missing 29-year-old and had temporarily moved into the family home to support both the grandmother and Lawrence, while also dealing with phone calls and other tasks around the home. This was not the only rumour that Lawrence wanted to nip in the bud, as he denied suggestions that a woman he had briefly dated 4 years earlier was somehow involved in Anne's disappearance. This was a denial the police also supported, with one officer stating, "We have no plans to interview this woman. We are not trying to trace possible love rivals." Aside from addressing the gossip, Lawrence would once again speak of the love he had for his missing bride, and the possibility that she may be pregnant, with him stating, "Anne could be carrying our child. It was something we desperately wanted. We lived for each other. We were like swans, made to mate for life. This home was our love nest. We chose it deliberately to have a family in. We were the only married couple on the estate without children, and we were going to change that. Anne even had an injection to protect her against German measles in pregnancy. That's how serious we are about starting a family." While he spoke of their plans for the future, Mr. Locke also spoke of the dreams that haunted him. "I keep having this nightmare. I keep seeing her being locked in a tiny room, unable to get out." Yet the anguished husband insisted that he still had hope that Anne was alive. Just a day after Lawrence was forced to defend the presence of Leslie at his home, the Daily Express reported that the missing woman's best friend had now left the premises. Mr. Locke once again addressed the press regarding the development, stating, "Leslie has been a great comfort, but she has gone home now. She has her own life to lead. I feel sorry for Anne and Leslie, and Leslie's family, after what people said about her staying here." Lawrence felt compelled to keep fending off the gossip, with him feeling like his every move was being scrutinized, as the shadow of suspicion lingered. On the 29th of May 1986, he appeared on Good Morning Britain, once again appealing for any news on his wife, after which he was asked to attend the police station, where he was led into an interview room. As he went to sit down, he noted the items which lay on the desk before him, and recognized them instantly as Anne's diary and address book. These belongings made his stomach turn, with him telling the press later, "Can you imagine how heartrending it was? Until then I convinced myself it would be okay. Now I have to face the facts. Anne wouldn't have thrown away those things. I know now that a crime has been committed, a really bad, nasty crime. Finding those things was about as bad and as final as finding her body." This feeling was solidified when he learned that the address book had been found in a hawthorn bush close to Brookman's Park, while 250 yards south of the station, in a dry riverbed, searchers recovered Anne's diary, yet there was still no sign of the leather bag where they had been kept, nor any indication of what had happened to Anne. Police later confirmed that these items were in a location which was consistent with Anne having left the train at Potter's Bar rather than at Brookman's Park. Detective Superintendent Ron Archer informed the press, "These finds put a different complexion to the whole inquiry. They strengthened the case for abduction of some harm having come to Mrs. Locke." The discovery confirmed that Anne had disappeared somewhere close to the final stretch of her journey that night, and the disposal of the items posed two potential scenarios. The first was that Anne had been attacked, and her killer had ransacked her handbag, keeping only what they deemed to be of value. Or the belongings had been ditched near the station in order to throw the police off the scent. The lack of any other signs pointing to what had happened to Anne meant the police had been unable to rule out anyone as a suspect. This, in the eyes of the press, included Lawrence Locke. The newspapers would pick up on the details that the husband had been interviewed several times, and his home had undergone extensive searches, which, although routine in a missing persons case, was presented as conspicuous. While speaking to the press outside his home, one journalist asked Lawrence directly whether he was responsible for Anne's disappearance. It was a blunt question which was met with an angry response, as the infuriated husband replied, "The police have never asked me if I have killed my wife. To be asked that question is beneath contempt. If anybody was to ask me, I would probably thump them. I have nothing to gain from my wife's death. All I could rustle up at this moment is £500. There is no insurance, no will, nothing. Everything we had went into this dream home. It is all we ever wanted. We were so happy here. This was just one of many instances where Lawrence was faced with the scrutiny of the press. As stated, articles had been produced which could be misconstrued, such as the incident with Anne's friend moving in for moral support being posed as proof of an affair, while Lawrence's decision to mow the lawn on Sunday the 1st of June, when Police 5 aired a reconstruction of Anne's case, was presented as him demonstrating unusual behaviour. Lawrence's explanation was published by the Daily Mail the following day, with him advising the journalist, "This is how we always spent our Sundays. Anne would cook lunch and I would mow the lawn. She's not here to make the lunch now, but I must still cut the lawn. Life has to go on." Perhaps perceiving the hurt all this scrutiny was causing, a senior detective would speak up in defence of Lawrence, stating, "My heart goes out to Mr. Locke. There has been some nasty gossip and some terrible insinuations. It is all wrong. Mr. Locke is not a suspect. He is innocent. It is a great tragedy for him. He is obviously deeply in love with his wife and has helped us magnificently throughout his grief." By the following weekend, it was formally reported that the despairing husband was no longer being treated as a suspect, as news broke that police were considering a possible link to the deaths of Alison Day and Martia Temboza. Yet while the press speculated, officers were unwilling to confirm or deny this supposition until they had definitive proof. For example, a body. However, Detective Chief Superintendent Charles Farquhar, who was leading the investigation into Alison Day's murder, would state it was a definite possibility that Anne had encountered the same killer. It was a man they believed had originally operated with a partner to target women in North London, but had since started a solo campaign of terror, during which he had claimed the lives of Alison and Martia. Although in public the police were unwilling to decisively state a connection, behind the scenes discussions between Hertfordshire, Surrey and Scotland Yard had started to take place, brought about by DI Paul Dockley, who was present at the Crime Watch studios during appeals into Alison's and Martia's murders. Now, as the lead investigator on Anne's case, D.I. Dockley listened intently as Detective Farquhar spoke to the host about Alison Day's murder, and he was also privy to the details of Martia's case. As he listened, the connections began to form. All three were attractive blondes. All were attacked near railway lines, and like with Anne's case, a bike used by the victim had been abandoned. He took his suspicions to his fellow officers, and it was agreed that there was a possible connection. Yet D.I. Dockley was unable to take these suspicions further, due to a lack of tangible evidence. As such, the search for Anne continued, as did the quest to find the man responsible for killing Alison and Martia. But another attack on the 9th of June awoke fears that he may have struck again. This time in the East London suburb of West Ham, where 20-year-old Helena Swan was found deceased in her Memorial Avenue flat. She had been raped and then strangled with an electrical cord. Not only did this have the same methodology, but when looking into Helena's movements that day, police learned that she had been to the local train station, which was less than 300 yards away from her flat, and purchased a travel pass for her sister. This sparked the theory that her assailant had followed her home. However, despite this initially being considered another one in the series, no official connection has been made, and 40 years later, the murder of Helena Swan remains unsolved. It seemed the police were no closer to catching their prey, and by the beginning of July 1986, all efforts to find Anne had proven futile. The search had utilised hundreds of officers, air support, dive teams and police dogs over a 7-week period, yet only her bag, address book and diary had been recovered. Resources and funding were stretched, and the decision was made to call an end to the search. 2 weeks later, D.I. Dockley would appear before a national audience during the monthly airing of Crime Watch. The episode began with a brief update on the Martia Tamboza case, with it being reported that since the earlier appeal, 156 calls had been received, including one from a pathologist who had provided a potential theory. This had helped investigators link Martia and Alison's case, along with a trio of rapes. A couple of minutes after this update, the reconstruction of Anne's disappearance was shown, featuring the 29-year-old receiving the call to come to work, and detailed the route she would have normally taken to get home after leaving the studios at around 8:30. It was revealed that security at LWT were the last to speak to Anne, and there had been no definitive sightings of her after she left her workplace. Therefore, the police were operating on the assumption that she undertook her journey as normal, but were appealing for people to come forward to help confirm this. They pointed out that one notable incident at Finsbury Park Station may help jog someone's memory. It occurred at around 9:38 p.m, when Anne should have been waiting on the platform for the train to Brookmans Park. Yet it was noted that a woman had been sitting on the bench laughing to herself. Naturally, the police believed that if people remembered this, they may also recall seeing Anne waiting at the station. This incident coincided with another one, just 9 stops away, at Brookmans Park, where a 16-year-old boy encountered a man loitering near the bike sheds. This male asked the teenager if he had seen anyone with an air gun, as 2 pedestrians had been targeted. The boy replied that he hadn't and quickly headed away, but police had yet to track down the male he had interacted with. Just 20 minutes later, the train Anne should have been on arrived at the station, but witnesses, Mr. and Mrs. Masterman, who were returning home from a hiking trip, disembarked the train and claimed they saw no one else leave with them. At 5 a.m, Anne's bike was located, just 60 yards away from the train station. But if she didn't get off the train, who had moved it? And how had her address book and diary come to be within 700 yards of the station, on a footpath which ran parallel with the railway line between Potter's Bar and Brookmans Park, as it crosses Blue Bridge Road? D.I. Dockley was asked about the discovery of these items and what he believed had led to their abandonment. The officer proceeded to produce a replica of the bag Anne had on her person that day. He stated it was possible that someone may have found the bag and abandoned the items, believing they were of little value. He went on to state, "We have made inquiries with the Director of Public Prosecutions with regards to this, and he's agreed that there will be no police prosecution if any persons comes forward saying they found that bag, removed any of the contents, or the money that was in it, as long as they're not involved with the disappearance of Anne." D.I. Dockley was then prompted to speak about an incident that had occurred on Saturday the 17th of May, shortly before midnight. The detective picked up on the cue and continued that a group returning to Brookmans Park Station after attending a dinner party came across a bench obstructing the entrance to the platform, which forced them to take an awkward route around it. Shortly after this, the group were approached by a male asking when the last train was due. They recalled he lingered briefly on the platform, but then swiftly left, taking the stairs and disappearing from view. It was pointed out that it seemed pertinent that an individual was seen acting suspiciously on the station on 2 occasions that weekend, with the second incident being the account of the teenager just 20 minutes before Anne was due to arrive at the station. The 16-year-old boy had provided police with a description of the individual, which D.I. Dockley repeated for the audience, advising that this man is described as 35 to 40 years old. He is 5'6" tall, of medium build. He has a receding hairline and collar-length brownish hair. He was wearing a bomber jacket and dark-coloured jeans or trousers, and it is believed that he spoke with a local accent. It would be noted later that this description varied to the eyewitness accounts of the man seen in the vicinity of Martia's crime scene, which may have cast the first glimmer of doubt as to whether they were indeed committed by the same individual. Hopes that the appeal would lead to a breakthrough were dashed, as there were very few callers, and what they received provided no new information. This, combined with the winding down of the search, meant the investigation was stalling, and unbeknown to officers, Lawrence Locke had been conducting his own search efforts in a desperate attempt to find any clues to Anne's disappearance. As such, he had been frequently undertaking his wife's journey to and from work, unwilling to give up until he had the answers, but he would later admit it was all in vain, as he could find nothing. But Lawrence may have become aware of how isolated some of Anne's route may have been, as she passed through the city, onto dimly lit platforms in a time before CCTV was widely used. Anne would likely have been acutely aware of the dangers faced by women travelling alone. She may have known of Alison Day's murder and similar attacks in the city. And as the Daily Mail reported, the underpass at Waterloo Underground Station, through which Anne would have traversed, was known to the staff at LWT as Murder Mile, because of the high number of crimes, primarily muggings, which took place there, meaning the 29-year-old likely remained very vigilant as she passed through this area. But whether she made it that far on the night she disappeared was uncertain, and after 10 weeks it seemed the answers were slipping away. The story had slipped from the headlines, the front pages now reporting on the pending nuptials of Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson. With just 2 days to the royal wedding, the centre of London was preparing for the event. Meanwhile, at roughly 3 p.m. on Monday the 21st of July, 2 railway workers were clearing the drains beside the tracks between Potters Bar and Brooklands Park, when a foul smell caught their attention. Upon inspecting the embankment, they discovered a badly decomposed body, concealed within the undergrowth, with loose branches, rubbish and leaves laid on top. The state of the remains suggested that they had been there for several weeks, and this made identifying the body more difficult, especially because it had been subjected to animal predation and exposure to the elements. Professor David Bowen was brought in to carry out a post-mortem, and determined that the individual had been suffocated by a sock, which measured 12 inches in length, that had been forced into the mouth, restricting their ability to breathe. Another sock was found lying loosely around the lower jawbone, but it was uncertain whether this had initially been around the neck or used as a blindfold, or perhaps a gag. The only means of identifying the remains were through dental records, which confirmed officers' worst fears. Anne Locke was deceased. Furthermore, she had been discovered just 100 yards from where the search had stopped. It would later be revealed that a miscommunication had meant that while 2 separate forces had been conducting the search, up to the boundaries of their own jurisdiction, for some reason the stretch in which Anne was found had not been searched by either. How this failing occurred would be scrutinised later, but at the time the primary focus of the investigation became catching the killer. The discovery of the body would enable investigators to ascertain a possible link with the murders of Alison Day and Marcia Tamboza. All 3 victims were similar in appearance, blonde, slim and petite. They had all been attacked close to railway lines, and while Alison was placed in water, evidence suggested that the killer had attempted to burn the bodies of both Marcia and Anne. It was believed that in all 3 incidents the killer had forced his victim to walk some distance from the initial abduction site. A Stanley knife found near Anne's body caused investigators to consider the blade had been used to ensure that she and perhaps the previous victims had been kept compliant while under threat of harm. All 3 had their hands tied in an almost identical prayer-like position behind their backs, although Anne's had been secured with tape, not cord, as had occurred previously. Despite some of these minor differences, it was deemed the cases shared enough in common to be considered as part of the series. As such, the decision was made to combine resources into one joint task force in order to apprehend the man the media was now calling the railway killer. The discovery gave Lawrence Locke some of the answers he'd been seeking, but he was devastated to learn that Anne was found less than a mile from Brookman's Park station, beside a footpath which led to neighbouring Potter's Bar, one which he and his wife used to spend warm evenings walking along as the commuter trains rushed by. The discovery had tainted his memory of those peaceful walks, but he was also frustrated by the failure of the police to find Anne's remains sooner. This delay would have consequences for the investigation, as it meant that crucial evidence was lost, weakening the prospect of securing a conviction. At a press conference held at Hendon Police Training College on Tuesday the 22nd of July 1986, Detective Chief Superintendent Vincent McFadden, who was coordinating the triple murder inquiry, informed the press of the similarities which had prompted them to connect the cases. He then went on to state that the individual they were seeking was likely someone with a detailed knowledge of the rail network, perhaps a current or former employee of British Rail, and that the man who murdered Martia had a rare blood group which made it easier to eliminate potential suspects. Through a database established by Operation Heart, which had been investigating a series of rapes in North London, it was revealed that police had also drawn a possible connection between 3 murders and a trio of rapes, which had taken place near Barnes Common in November 1984, Hadley Wood train station in February 1985, and at West Hampstead Station in August 1985. In each of these cases, the attacker was said to be in his mid-20s, fair-haired and had an athletic build. But as the police started a joint task force, which would see one of the biggest manhunts in English policing history, a storm was brewing regarding how Anne Locke's case had been handled. Lawrence Locke sent a formal letter of complaint to the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Kenneth Newman, and Hertfordshire Chief Constable, Mr. Trevor Morris, as well as to the Watchdog Police Complaints Authority, voicing his concerns regarding how his wife's case had been handled. In the correspondence, he alleged that on 2 occasions he requested that the police search the path which ran from Brookman's Park to Potter's Bar, which followed the railway line, yet his request was ignored. Had the police followed through, Anne's body may have been recovered sooner. He also highlighted that his wife's bike had been returned to him within minutes of it being found and prior to any forensic testing being carried out. Lawrence claimed that while under questioning, detectives had asked him numerous times to submit to hypnosis, and he also felt that they had withheld the discovery of his wife's diary as a means of ensuring he would make a television appeal. Addressing his motives for raising these issues, Mr. Locke stated, "I'm not speaking now to start some sort of battle of blame between Hertfordshire and the Met, but some major errors have been made," adding, "The police must catch the person who murdered my wife. He is a shrewd man who waits in the right places before he attacks." His final sentiment was one the investigators shared. And now, with 4 police forces united, the search for the railway killer intensified. Join me next time as I delve into the police investigation and subsequent apprehension of the murderer.
So in the meantime, keep an eye on those shadows.